All right. Hi, everybody. Hope you guys are ready to have some questions answered today. Thank you so much for being here and for submitting all your questions. And let's jump right into it. And hopefully we can get to as many as possible today. All right. Next question is from John, who's on here with us live. And he wants
Hi,
to
John.
know, if you were doing litigation for the DC KKK lawsuits, what would be your litigation strategy generally? More specifically, would you try to get Trump on the stand, etc.?
Two pieces of strategy, I guess. First, these lawsuits have been really effective. We just did today, and you'll hear it in a couple weeks, a talking book with Dahlia Lithwick and what a lawyer did in response to the Charlottesville case. But so many of the worst actors here are really just kind of ragtag braggarts, and getting them in the pocketbook is really a great way to disable them and to really you know basically, I mean, when there's a famous KKK case itself that bankrupted a building and the plaintiffs wound up taking over the KKK headquarters. So it's, very, the KKK's normal move will be saying something like, you can't put us in jail because it's political speech. Charlottesville, they were able to get past that, but in a civil suit, if you just want to, show harm, they can be forced to pay money that they don't have. That would be goal one. Goal two, oh yeah, get Trump to be deposed. He's got to be the worst deponent of all time, not to mention the unbelievable fodder for cross-examination, because you have lie after lie after lie after lie after lie. And it's all fair game, because in these situations, his credibility is necessarily in play. And there would be such, he's used to blustering and bullying in the public sphere, but the law is harsher than that. He'd have to answer the questions, and he would just be toast. I think that's why what's called a motion to dismiss matters a lot in these cases, because what happens is you make allegations, and then, as a matter of course, the person on the other side, that's Trump here, will say, dismiss the case. Even if everything the guy said was right, there wouldn't be a cause of action. And if the judge says, no, I'm not going to dismiss it, now you move to discovery, which includes depositions. And we saw, by the way, so the best example of this so far was the Trump University stuff in Florida around 2016. All of a sudden, he had to settle. His for him to be deposed, and right now he's been ordered to be deposed once or twice. Is just he can't survive. He would really look terrible. One other point. So he has been ordered to be deposed in the New York AG case, and he showed up and just took the fifth again and again and again. But the question is about the civil lawsuits. Famously, you can't force somebody to testify against himself in a criminal trial. But in a civil lawsuit, you can, if they take the fifth, you can actually comment on it. You can say, why wouldn't he say? Why did he invoke the fifth? And that's murder to a jury. So a jury in these civil cases would hear him. I mean, they made him say Fifth Amendment, Fifth Amendment, Fifth Amendment for 5 hours. They'd hear it again and again, and they could actually use it as evidence against him. So it's a very potent tool, the deposition, even if Trump winds up taking the fifth in the civil setting.
And just to follow up on that,
Yeah.
when you were talking about the case earlier, were you referencing the Northern Idaho case with the Aryan Nations or a different
The
case?
one I was actually talking about was the Southern Poverty Law Center in, I want to say, Alabama or Mississippi. But this is, so, there are, it's generally the case. It was in Pennsylvania also, that these groups, in fact, let me take a step back, because this came up in our most recent podcast with Juliet. These groups are not going to, you will have ragtag elements who'll be saying, completely vile and obnoxious things. The question is, will they get stronger or will they get weaker? And that is what people, since the Southern Poverty Law Center did it for the KKK 15, 20 years ago, a standard item in the playbook. really get them where they live and it's easy enough to bankrupt them and otherwise sort of force what you want to do is disassemble the group qua group. And if it's making them all have bankrupt, that's a good way to sort of make them uncohesive. So anyway, what I was talking about though was the Southern Poverty Law Center one, not the Northern Idaho, but it's sort of a piece. Thanks for that, John. Okay.
Yeah, next one is also from someone who's here live. It's from Charlie, who is from Pittsburgh as well.
Oh yeah.
And he wants to know what, if anything, will finally take down Ketchup Buffon, aka FPOTUS.
Well, as we learned just yesterday, hope springs eternal. What a game that was, and such twists and turns, but the right and just prevailed. That'll be an inside one between Charlie and me. What will it take to bring him down? Well, so look, I think the DOJ, and we have to talk about what it means to bring down. I mean, let's say he's convicted of a crime, and then a Republican president. You have the most crazy scenarios, like he runs from prison and wins, or he's pardoned. There is no ultimate way, as long as the Republican Party is going to stay in thrall to him, to 100% stitch it up. You can even convict him and have an agreement. Okay, Trump, you're looking at 20 years. If you agree to just no longer be a pox on the body politic, you're not going to run, we'll make it shorter. That's an enforceable contract. But guess what? If in 2024 he says, well, just kidding, there won't be a way to stop him. But if what bring him down means is a strong criminal conviction, there are 3 or 4 ones on the horizon. And by the way, there are also cases besides criminal cases that are going to take a huge bite out of him. And I'm thinking of the case in New York against the Trump organization. That'll be criminal penalties. It might actually have the whole organization shut down and the like. But I think what the Department of Justice is, the reason there's been a lot of excitement and interest in the MarALago search is it's a very discrete set of facts. It doesn't have, as anything in January 6th does have, any kind of complication involving prospective defenses of political speech. I'm the president, and this was just me in my political role. That those defenses ought to fail, but they're complicated. And the real question, I think, for the DOJ is not the normal standards of federal prosecution. That is, can they show he's probably guilty, show they can get a conviction? I think there'll be 2, 3, 4, 5 offenses they could show that. But notwithstanding the kind of bromides of everyone is equal in front of the law, I just think it's inevitable that someone, and that might be Merrick Garland, or it might be Joe Biden, or it might be both, will need to consider this case that we can prove against the former president is proving it in the best interests of the country. People like howl when they hear that, because they think, are you even suggesting that different standard of law? And the short answer is kind of, sort of, in the sense that, I think the Nixon case stands for this. There's an important calculus to make that's in some ways more important than Donald Trump about what's in the best interests of the country. All that said, I and a lot of people have come to the view that even looking at it through that prism, the only thing worse than prosecuting him would be not prosecuting him. So I think there's a feeling out there that his goose is getting cooked. And when you see the kind of earnest and aggressive investigatory moves that the DOJ is making with respect both to MarALago, and we just found out this week 40 new subpoenas on January 6th, and really all directed at Trump. They are zeroing in, and I don't see them doing that if they didn't really believe that this is this is going to be the right thing to do. And it does make sense. It's a whole bigger topic, but among other things, he's such a jackass and has continued to be out there doing the same kinds of things that made him so toxic to the country. Contrast that, say, with Nixon, who had the, dignity or institutional regard to slink away and have let the country be done with him. But the poison of Trump remains in our veins, and we need to get rid of it.
Definitely. And just a reminder to everybody too, that if you ever have a follow-up on any of your questions, you can go ahead and put that in the chat too, and I'll ask that as well. All right, next up, we've got one from Jan, who's here with us live, who wants to know, do you have any theories as to why the Trump team nominated Deary as an SM? Andrew Weissman says he is an A+ judge, but I'm always suspicious of their choices.
Right. As am I, it's funny because everything they could have done at all reasonable, like for instance, played ball a little with the stay because they're gambling on the 11th Circuit. You could always count on him to do the outrageous thing because, among other things, he's not bound by legal argument or reasoning or facts. He'll, they'll assert anything. So, all I can say is that it was interesting. Now they got it in at midnight. Trump doesn't know squat about any kind of judge or anything like that. He probably saw, appointed by Ronald Reagan. But, Republicans can appoint some very solid district court judges. So my best guess is he tries to control everything, but he didn't even know here. Huck was more his kind of, he's a political actor from Florida. So I just think in general, I'll bet there's some very interesting built-in conflicts between the lawyers and Trump here about how aggressive to be, about how flagrant to be in false factual assertions that can get the lawyers more than reprimanded, disciplined. And so I just think he doesn't know, and they proffered somebody respectable, and it looks like that's going to be the guy, right? Because for no reason they said that we object to both the DOJ guys, and DOJ said no, Deary's okay. And Weissman and others, not just Andrew, though Andrew Weissman is a strong authority, are there to tell you this guy's a fair, hardworking judge, and that's what you look for in a special master. Of course, as long as they're calling balls and strikes on attorney-client, they still don't want him anywhere near the classified stuff. They still don't want him to be trying to adjudicate executive privilege with no legal standards. But if you're going to have somebody in that role and let her sort of have her way a bit and save face, I think he's a decent enough choice, and there's no real strong reason to oppose him. So DOJ was smart there.
Yeah. Santiago, who's here with us live, wants to know, and I'm a little bit excited as a fresh civil procedure student to read this question because it has citations in it. What do you make of Trump's response concerning the PRA governing the disputed documents? If Trump is right, then Judge Cannon must dismiss for lack of jurisdiction under Rule 44, Section 2204E.
Wow, he's really well. I think you should answer this one.
And I know that now. I know what that means.
Right.
Also, the PRA generally requires designation of personal versus presidential records at their creation, 2203B. That did not happen here, and case law doesn't allow a former president to go back and designate records as personal once out of office. American Historical Association versus Peterson, I think he brings up there. And then plus, if they're not personal, the DOJ could get them anyways.
Yeah. So let's start with the PRA. So Trump says again and again, it's undisputed that that the standards for returning documents are set by the PRA. Now, the PRA is an important piece here because it says 100% clarity, and this why it was passed. These are public records. They belong to us. They don't belong to, he's a citizen here and he doesn't have them at all. All that is true. but he wants it to be the whole ball of wax. And that's because there aren't criminal penalties under the PRA, or at least it's very murky. And that would undermine the whole search, in fact, the whole criminal case. But it's like one of several things he's doing that are just, like out of Alice in Wonderland, because it's the facts are so contrary. There's a search warrant here. It was premised on probable cause for 3 different crimes. None of them is the PRA. That's how the search warrant process works. That's what the magistrate found, and it was a very solid finding, because you went down there and lo and behold, there's all these things around. So the assertion that because it's sort of a piece of the puzzle that it's the whole deal, seems to me like such a weak make weight argument, not one even she went for when she did it last time. So, it's a I would call it a red herring, but it's not. It's more obvious than that. So it's just really a changing of the subject. And now, so the first half. So we don't have everybody jump off the call. Just to say what his position is. What's really interesting about what he did is he avoided stating a position, and he just tried to say, well, the government hasn't proven yet it's classified. That's just what they say. Of course, that's what it means to be classified. Or I had a lot of power as president to declassify things, but no even assertion that he did. So it's this pretty ham-handed gambit of saying, well, I could have done this fact or that fact. Of course, to assert it would put the lawyers and potentially him exposed to criminal liability under, since we're throwing around statutory numbers, 1001 for false statements. And so he did this very bizarre thing of saying, well, the government hasn't shown yet, say that it's classified or that I didn't declassify. We've just had a search. That's what we've had. Now the government investigates and decides whether to bring charges. The notion that once you have a search, you can stop the music and make the government, give back all the documents, unless and until the government shows at that point all the things it wants to prove down the line in a criminal case. If that were so, literally, you could never have an espionage case, right? Think of every case there's ever been, from the Rosenbergs to Felix Bloch to, all the way up, because the guy could always say, well, what do you mean classified? We haven't decided it's classified yet. I haven't taken it. Maybe the court will decide it is, but right now they haven't. So I haven't done anything wrong. It's a really like boneheaded argument. On the other hand, he made a few boneheaded arguments that are now the law, at least of the Southern District of Florida. So we're really gonna have to see. She has to decide by Thursday. She hasn't asked for a hearing, which would be the obvious place where she could say, "Oh, Trump, you keep saying again and again you had the power to declare. Did you or didn't you? I need to know the facts if you want me to decide." But there doesn't seem to be the prospect that that's going to happen. And you can bet that she will rule by Thursday, because otherwise it'll get yanked away from her to the 11th Circuit. So there you have it. Was that, I know it was a very specific kind of set of legal precedents and statutes, but was it basically responsive? Have I answered it? So,
I'm
Alfonso on the phone, right? I mean, on the line, you can
Mhm.
ask him. Okay,
Yeah, go
great.
ahead and let us know if there's any
Sort
follow.
of, sort of. Well, go ahead, Santiago, bring it up. Come on. Sort of. Okay, one follow up. It's probably my fault, but and I'll do my best. Give me one follow up. Doesn't Trump lose if he wins? Well, in the long run, we're all dead. So if it takes a few years to unscramble the eggs on what's executive privilege and what isn't, and it's 2024, no, I think he could. I think he could win and win, I guess. or rather, Judge Cannon loses jurisdiction. That'll depend on the 11th Circuit and if they enter the state. I think they will. Yeah, I actually think, I predicted she wouldn't go as far as she did because she went. She had some indicia of being a serious judge, and she said she wanted to go write it. And I thought, you just can't write this. And I was right. You can't write it, but it didn't keep her from putting, like words on a paper. So we have the same thing now, but it's more pointed, the pressure on her, because it's going up to the 11th Circuit. And I think even conservative judges, we have an unrebutted affidavit that basically shows for purposes of where we are now on that, she's really imperiling national security. I don't see judges on the 11th Circuit ignoring that the way if she chooses to. So she's really painted into a corner. Okay, sorry. Next one. Colin, am I going too long? You want me to shorten my answers for everyone?
No,
If they
you're
do, you can
good.
just tell them. All right, go
We're
ahead.
lucky enough that I figured out how to make it so we don't have a 40-minute time limit. So you
All right.
can
Yeah.
go on as much as you want. All right. J Tool, who's on the call with us, says, hi. What do you think about the deputies in Moscow and St. Petersburg condemning Putin? Is this the beginning of the end? Hopefully he won't take all of them out. ...
Yeah. So I'm really, really interested in this and have tried to go to school on it, but of course I'm no expert. But look, the last week has been brutal for him, and we've seen, I think, just the tangible and kind of beautiful impact of, one side having a righteous sense of mission and the other side not. And by all accounts, the Russians who threw down their rifles and ran away just were ragtag and demoralized. Here's a fact I hadn't known until recently. 80% of the entire Russian army has now been deployed into Ukraine. So this isn't small. On the other hand, given that he's a despot, and I just say that sort of in objective terms, what he can do if he orders it up. Um, People I respect basically say, you know, there's really no end game where he just is brought to the table and negotiates a peace that doesn't include some kind of land grab that Zelensky and Ukraine, after all the sacrifices and inspiration they've displayed, wouldn't go for. So what you say is heartening, and I wish it could be. And again, I'm no expert, but to the extent I have a sense of things, it's basically that the one thing that he can do, more and more isolated, bigger hits on the economy. Although so far the sanctions haven't really been very, they're selling as much gas as before, making as much money. But anyway, I think it's one thing to beat them up here and there, even drive them all the way back, but another to actually have him wave a white flag. And most people who know him say that'll never happen. So what does that entail for not just Ukraine, but the Western community? It's a very tricky point. It's just me. Maybe I'm wrong.
All right. So moving to some more of our pre-submitted questions. Will Fox News ever be held accountable other than in civil proceedings like Dominion voting for its role in January 6th and the misinformation it spreads? Could it ever be shut down for the hood of public safety? How is their speech different from falsely yelling fire in a crowded theater?
Yeah. So first of all, that except for little clause is pretty important. They're being sued in the billions, and they have not a leg to stand on, and they're having the worst, depositions that are up there with the discomfort I described to Trump. And I think they are looking at, it's not 1.5 billion, but I think they may be looking at north of 500 million real check they have to write. And, even for Murdoch and company, that's some real money. So that's for starters. Now, what about the falsehood? So basically, now the thing that's clobbering them here is defamation. But and for defamation, they're going to have to prove, and the plaintiffs can prove in a limited respect. The Dominion machines are perfect. That basically Fox knew what it was saying was false. And that's for first year law students and others will know that that's a constitutional requirement, although very interesting and a total departure here. But um, we're going to be down in Austin in a few weeks with two really great panels, and one of them is on the Supreme Court. And there's actually some sentiment on the Supreme Court. Guess who? Well, it begins with Thomas and Alito, um, to revisit this absolute canon of American law, that is New York Times versus Sullivan. But as long as it's still good law, so the proof is going to have to be an individual lie. What they knew it was a lie. And first of all, they're very good about saying outrageous, obviously false stuff, but couching it in what can be defended by the lawyers. I mean, they're hand in hand with lawyers as opinion rather than fact. And then, and then they are the press. So the short answer is I don't hold out much. Let me say, I totally sympathize. I used to do Fox, and I thought it was a good thing to do because maybe I persuade, as opposed to MSNBC, maybe I persuade like 3 people. And I just stopped doing it because it was so abundantly clear to me this is not a bona fide news organization, and I didn't want to give any kind of weight or of my own credibility to the notion that it was. So I stopped. But even so, I think the prospect, and I'll say one more prefatory thing, it's been unbelievably um, damaging and deleterious, and connected to the whole rise of Trump and the basic notion that if Fox were around, Nixon would never have gone down. There's a lot to be said for it. All that said, the answer to your question is, besides some very honking big defamation verdicts where they can really prove they have really good evidence that they knew it was a lie, I don't see any big dissolution or demolition of the Fox empire by the legal system.
All right, next one is reactions to Farenthold New York Times article on COVID-related fraud unleashed lots of finger pointing and holier than thou comments. Are there policy implications or just a feeding frenzy for lawyers?
That's a great question. And, I'm actually still a lawyer, and that's exactly the law that I practice, is fraud against the government. And anybody who's in that field knew as soon as that, we needed it. So glad we did it. Good victory for Biden. But talk about a honeypot that a lot of people were going to be dipping their paws into, including very legally. You might have seen this, had friends or know people who got loans there that they didn't need the damn loans. But when you're legislating on that level, it's very hard to be more sort of tailored and direct. But huge amounts of fraud in general. There are estimates of as high as 40% for regular government programs. So something special like this that was pretty close to, come one, come all, here's your check, was going to be rife with fraud. It has been. And what's the regime? I think, it's too much for the government, and that's where the public-private partnership that is the False Claims Act, which is what my legal practice consists of, where you have whistleblowers come in and bring cases and then split, have a portion of that amount that goes back to the taxpayer. That's really what they need, and so they really have to unleash a whole bunch of private attorneys because the fraud personnel in the civil division of the Department of Justice is just completely swamped.
All right. Now we're moving to Twitter. What are some
Huh.
examples of probable cause that would allow the FBI to obtain a search warrant for Bedminster, Trump Tower, and maybe the Virginia Golf Club? Does DOJ or FBI need to wait until Judge Cannon rules regarding special master filings, or can they file anything in DC?
Yeah, they could file it tonight. It's a very interesting and tricky question whether they'll want to, especially because A, Cannon is such a mess, and B, the jury pool in Florida, you can imagine jury nullification with 1 or 2 adamant Trumpistas. But the department's very they're not like they really are adamant that they're not like a private litigant, so they don't want to just take or appear to just take the kind of advantage that a private litigant could. So it's a lot of people are out there saying, "Oh, of course they will file in DC," but it's not clear to me. But they could. All right, what would they have to do? You know, the thing we have yet to learn about, and we won't learn about unless he's charged, the most interesting part of the affidavit is, and we saw like a few sentences, the FBI developed additional evidence, black, 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 but we have it on pretty good authority and surmise that they had all these informants down there, right? And people who told them we still have classified documents. Who those people are, it's going to be very interesting. So probable cause to remind everyone just means more likely than not. So if they had a decent case that there were classified docs there, they could get a search warrant, but not enough to just speculate. So I think what it would take basically is some kind of insider to say he's got some here too. And that would be filed in the district where those documents would be, and any sort of parallel to what's happening in Palm Beach now with Judge Cannon would be with the judge in that jurisdiction.
Right. The recently released March 2019 Mueller memo has gotten, quote, lost in the shuffle of Trump news. I want to understand the detailed key points of the errors made in this memo. Where can I read such a document to the bar memo?
You mean a document, Kalena, is the listener asking for a document that goes into what's wrong with the bar memo? Is that
I
how
think
you read
so,
it?
yeah.
Yeah, so there's a few places like that. I'm pretty sure that is it lawfare or law and security. In any event, it's Ryan Goodman has gone through it kind of top to bottom. I think maybe Kyle Cheney as well. And it's not that hard. It is sort of like shooting fish in a barrel because it's a document that, just and I would actually just look at, I don't know if he wrote anything, but Andrew Weissman's tweets, remember Weissman is one of the main guys on the Mueller investigation. But it's just so clear that for anyone who was familiar with the Mueller report, including any of us in the public, that it was a tendentious, or you could say inaccurate account of what was there, and a whitewash. I have this hard history with Bill Barr, I used to work with and admired quite a lot. And now, he's been pretty impressive in these last few weeks, but this was his lowest moment. And I'll say one thing that I said at the time. I also tweeted about it myself a lot. So the whole premise of the memo is, well, Mueller decided not to charge Trump because of DOJ policy, and therefore he didn't want to opine on whether Trump was guilty because, in his very sort of Marquis of Queensberry rules way, he thought that would be not cricket because normally someone charged can clear themselves in a court of law, and Trump wouldn't have been able to. Okay. So the department determines, and these are the sort of political actors, no, you really need to you've gone to the end. We need to know is he culpable or not? All right. At that point, it is blindingly obvious that the person to make that judgment is the one who has investigated this thoroughly for years and who's appointed specifically because he's an apolitical actor. That would be one Robert Mueller. Instead, they isolate him completely. And Bill Barr, aided, by the way, by Rod Rosenstein, there's still some splaining to do there, comes out and does. So just the mere fact of his involvement was squirrely. But anyway, in terms of the sort of chapter and verse rebuttal, I think Ryan Goodman has something good. I'll try to remember what it was, tell Kalena, and Kalena, you know who's asking this
Mhm.
question, right? So if it turns out not to be, if you go to Ryan Goodman, it's not there, shoot Kalena an email and we'll find it for you. A
Yeah.
good article. Okay.
Mhm. All right. From Ed, who's on the call right now. What is the likelihood DOJ has placed someone on the MarALago staff? Could they be the informant you just mentioned?
Small, I think. There are such things as sort of elaborate confidential informants, but man, that'd be tricky. It also could backfire. Now, I think the people who are talking are, I mean, think about it. Trump, 78, complete blustery. Are you going to, even if you like him and are loyal to him, are you going to want to go down with the ship? So I think people in general who the FBI knocks on the door of, they're like, yeah, I'm going to tell the truth now that I can't get away with this, pretending I don't have the obligation as a citizen. So I think the FBI has maybe reached out to people, but I very much doubt there's the sort of, made for TV movie confidential informant who's really an undercover cop, as it were. Let's take about one because I've got to go do a hit.
Oh,
But
yes.
let's take one. Let's go for
From
another
the
5 or
Harry's
6
hit
minutes.
stage.
Right, exactly.
Yes, one more. At the end of this whole debacle with Donald, what's the likelihood that DOJ identifies and charges many more individuals beyond him for the unlawful possession and mishandling? And if so, who? What's the likelihood his kids did or didn't ever see any of those documents?
Yeah, so it is a great point in general. There was before all this carping about DOJ's aggressiveness. I think that's been kind of put to rest. But even in a circumstance, and we talked about this about half an hour ago, where they say we're going to give him a pass, even though he's a guilty son of a bitch. And I think it's more likely than not, they won't do that. But even there, we've got some unresolved questions about, first of all, the Mark Meadows of the world, even potentially members of, but, there are some important actors with him, and I think they will see charges. Now, the questioner put it specifically in terms of the Mar-a-Lago documents. And I think the short answer there is we really don't know. January 6th played out in real time, and but it's possible that there's one real mustachio twirling or well, somebody referred to orange. What did my Pittsburgh guy call him? Orange Buffon guy or whatever. Um, so it's fine, but there's really one guy and one guy who really shares all the criminal culpability, and that's Donald Trump. Although, and as I say it, I should drop a very important asterisk, which is, um, jerk off that he is. He had people actually, lawyers actually write and sign attestations that were false. Those guys are really hurting now, and they will have to, potentially face liability and maybe be pushed to cooperate.
Yeah.
I
And that
can I
was
can tell
the
you that ring you hear behind my back is a major network that has become a little more conservative in the last couple weeks. That's all I'll say. But if by chance, and I consider this extremely remote, you feel you haven't had enough of me in the last 45 minutes, I should be on CNN in about 45 more minutes. So that's why I have to sign off.
All right. And that was the ketchup bouffant, by the way, the reference that
Okay, there you go. Yeah,
was made earlier. Although orange bouffant works too, I think.
right.
All right. Well, thank you so much,
As
everybody.
always, it's been really fun, guys. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much. I am gonna get into contact with a lot of you about getting some free
And
swag.
I'm going to sign off now, Kalena, if you give
Yes.
me permission. Okay, bye, guys.
Bye. Yeah, so just keep an eye out for some Q&A swag emails if I had a question answered by you. And if not, I hope you really enjoyed it, and we'll see you all next month.